This picture raised so many questions that we decided to investigate further. During our search, we discovered something even more shocking. What was it? You'll find out right now. Deep in the darkness of the Atlantic, among the wreckage of one of history's greatest maritime tragedies, researchers recently stumbled upon something astonishing. A perfectly preserved bronze statuette, eerily reminiscent of the famous Diana of Versailles. This artifact, a miniature sculpture of the Roman goddess of the hunt, lay buried beneath layers of sediment, shielded from corrosive saltwater by a strange pocket of debris. Experts believe this statuette was a luxury item, possibly a gift or a prized possession of a wealthy passenger. What makes it truly remarkable is its condition. Unlike other metallic artifacts that corroded over time, this piece remains almost untouched, its fine details still crisp. Some speculate that the unique mix of cold temperatures, pressure, and a chemical reaction from the ship's metal created an environment that slowed deterioration. But here's where it gets even stranger. The statuette wasn't listed on any known cargo manifest or passenger inventory. It simply appeared, as if waiting to be discovered. Could it have been smuggled on board? Was it lost before the disaster and somehow ended up among the wreckage? No one knows for sure. The eerie preservation of the artifact has led some to theorize that there may be other hidden pockets in the Titanic, preserving lost relics of the past in ways we never imagined. Just when researchers thought they had cataloged every type of personal artifact from the Titanic, they came across something that left them stunned. An ancient megalodon tooth, but not just any tooth. This massive fossil, estimated to be millions of years old, had been carefully set into a gold frame and fashioned into a necklace. The idea that such a relic was on board raises more questions than answers. Who owned it? Was it a rare collector's item? Or did it hold some deeper meaning, perhaps a belief in its power or a connection to the mysterious deep? More intriguing is how the necklace survived it all. Unlike gold, which resists corrosion, fossilized teeth from long-extinct predators are porous and fragile. Yet this one remained intact, protected by the very shipwreck that doomed its owner. Even stranger, no records mention a passenger bringing such an object aboard, leading some to wonder if it was an unlisted treasure, a smuggled artifact, or even a hidden gift. The image of someone on the Titanic, proudly wearing a relic from a prehistoric monster of the sea, is both eerie and fascinating. And speaking of objects frozen in time, another discovery has left scientists with an unsettling reminder of the exact moment the great ship met its fate. A rust-covered pocket watch, its delicate hands forever frozen at 2:18 a.m., was found nestled beneath a twisted section of the Titanic's hull. Unlike many other timepieces recovered over the years, this one was found at a spot that matches precisely with survivor testimonies of when the ship made its final descent beneath the waves. Its placement suggests it may have belonged to a passenger who held onto it until the very end, a heartbreaking reminder of those last chaotic moments. The watch's glass face was shattered, likely from impact, yet the mechanism inside remained visible, stopped at the exact minute history recorded as the ship's final breath. This discovery isn't just another artifact, it's a timestamp of a tragedy, a piece of history encased in rust and salt. What's even more chilling is the condition of the watch's chain. Unlike most metals which have corroded over the decades, the links remain surprisingly well preserved, as if shielding their lost owner's last moments from time itself. And time, as it turns out, has preserved yet another remarkable relic. A bronze cherub that once illuminated the heart of Titanic's grandeur. Among the most breathtaking finds in the recent Titanic expedition was a bronze cherub, one of the ornate statues that once lined the ship's iconic grand staircase. For decades, this piece of Titanic's elegance was thought to have been lost forever. Yet there it was, resting beneath layers of debris, its once polished surface now encrusted with deep-sea growth. The cherub, likely dislodged during the ship's violent descent, is one of the few decorative artifacts from the grand staircase ever recovered. What makes it so significant isn't just its rarity, but what it represents, the opulence of Titanic's design, now frozen in time at the bottom of the Atlantic. Unlike wooden artifacts that rotted away long ago, the bronze statue, though tarnished, still holds its form. Even stranger, experts noted that the cherub's right hand, once outstretched to hold a glowing lamp, was missing. Some speculate it may still lie somewhere nearby, waiting to be uncovered. But while the Cherub was a symbol of Titanic's splendor, another newly explored section of the wreck reveals a more personal, almost haunting glimpse into the life of the ship's captain. In a hidden corner of the wreck, buried beneath collapsed walls and twisted metal, researchers uncovered an astonishingly well-preserved relic, Captain Edward Smith's private bathtub. The discovery was both eerie and intimate, offering a rare, unfiltered look into the personal space of the man who commanded the Titanic. The tub, once part of the captain's lavish quarters, had somehow remained recognizable despite more than a century underwater. The porcelain was cracked and heavily rusted, but its shape was intact. What fascinated experts the most was the way the sea had claimed it. Strange, ghostly formations of rusticles now drape over the edges like frozen waterfalls, making it look almost otherworldly. Standing before this relic, it's impossible not to imagine the moments before the disaster, when Smith may have stood in that very room, contemplating his final voyage. And in an ironic twist, deep-sea technology, the very thing that helped locate his bathtub, also led to an unexpected find. One belonging not to Titanic's original voyage, but to those who first tried to uncover its secrets. As cameras scanned the ocean floor for lost artifacts, something unexpected came into view. An old mechanical robotic arm, detached and half buried in the sediment. Unlike the ship's remains, this piece of equipment wasn't from 1912, but rather from one of the earliest expeditions to explore Titanic's wreck. The robotic arm was part of a submersible used in the 1980s and 90s, back when technology was first allowing humans to see Titanic's ruins up close. It was likely lost during an attempt to retrieve artifacts or navigate the wreck's tight corridors. What makes this find so unusual is how time has treated it. Unlike Titanic's rust-covered relics, the arm remains relatively intact, its joints and metal plating still visible under the layers of marine growth. In a way, it's a relic of two eras, the tragedy of 1912 and the decades-long quest to uncover its secrets. As modern explorers continue to search, they not only uncover Titanic's past, but also remnants of their own history, left behind in the deep. But this discovery raises another question. If forgotten expedition equipment can be found decades later, what else might still be hidden beneath Titanic's ruins? Among the countless scattered remnants of the Titanic, one discovery stood out for its eerie sense of presence. A perfectly preserved porthole window, still intact, its thick glass remarkably almost unbroken after more than a century beneath the crushing pressure of the Atlantic depths. This find isn't just another piece of wreckage, it's a silent witness to the tragedy, a literal window into the past. What makes this discovery so remarkable is how rare it is. Most portholes that have been found before were either shattered or corroded beyond recognition. This one, however, remained sealed, its brass fittings encrusted with deep-sea deposits but otherwise well preserved. Some speculate that it may have belonged to a first-class cabin, possibly one with a direct view of the night sky as the ship sank. There's something deeply unsettling about looking through that same glass today, knowing that someone, in their final moments, may have done the same, gazing out at the vast ocean, watching the cold, dark waters rise. What remains of the Titanic today is a haunting shell of what was once the grandest ship ever built. Over a century beneath the crushing pressure of the Atlantic, the wreck has been claimed by time, its once pristine steel structure now crumbling into the abyss. The bow, once instantly recognizable, is collapsing inward, while the stern, which broke apart during the sinking, has become an unrecognizable tangle of twisted metal. The grand staircase, where first-class passengers once strolled in elegance, has long since vanished, leaving behind only traces of its former glory. Recent deep-sea scans and 3D mapping have revealed just how much the Titanic has deteriorated in the past few decades. Rusticles, strange icicle-like formations created by deep-sea bacteria, are eating away at the ship's remains, converting its iron into fine, rust-colored dust. Some experts estimate that entire sections of the wreck could vanish within the next few decades, collapsing into the seafloor under their own weight. The latest expeditions have even captured footage of areas where entire walls have caved in, structures have disappeared, and once solid decks have become fragile, paper-thin layers of rust. What's most shocking is that this process is accelerating. While the Titanic sat relatively stable for much of the 20th century, recent studies suggest that its decay has sped up dramatically in the past 2 decades. Some scientists now predict that within 20 to 30 years, much of the wreck will be unrecognizable, reduced to little more than scattered debris. The Titanic is not just sinking, it is dissolving, erasing itself from history with every passing year. And yet, despite this decay, the wreck remains one of the most mesmerizing sights in the deep ocean. Its presence is a powerful reminder of a moment frozen in time, a ship that set sail in triumph but now rests in silence, slowly disappearing into the dark. The Titanic is vanishing, but its story will never fade. The Titanic is slowly disappearing, but its legacy is stronger than ever. Beyond the wreckage, the ship's history is filled with fascinating facts, engineering feats, overlooked details, and incredible luxuries. Now, let's explore the Titanic beyond the ocean floor. Before it became the most famous shipwreck in history, the Titanic was an engineering triumph. Built in Belfast, Ireland by the Harland and Wolff shipyard, it was one of the largest moving objects ever created, stretching 882 feet in length and weighing over 46,000 tons. At the time, its sheer scale was astonishing, longer than the tallest buildings of its era and nearly the length of 3 football fields. Engineers used over 3 million rivets to hold its steel plates together, and the ship was powered by massive steam engines capable of generating 46,000 horsepower. But what truly set the Titanic apart wasn't just its size. It was designed with cutting-edge technology, including a double-bottomed hull and 16 watertight compartments, meant to keep it afloat even if multiple sections were breached. Ironically, this same design led to its downfall. When the iceberg tore open 5 compartments, the ship's own weight dragged it down. Still, for its time, the Titanic was a floating masterpiece, a ship built for comfort as much as capability, and that comfort extended to luxuries rarely seen at sea, including something that few passengers had ever experienced before: a swimming pool on a moving vessel. At a time when most ships prioritized practicality over leisure, the Titanic dared to offer luxuries that were unheard of, including an onboard swimming pool. Located on the ship's F deck, the pool was exclusive to first-class passengers and filled with seawater, heated to a comfortable temperature. For many, this was an entirely new experience. Indoor swimming pools were still a rarity on land, let alone on a ship in the middle of the Atlantic. What made the Titanic's pool so unique wasn't just its existence, but how advanced it was for the time. It had tiled walls, steps leading into the water, and even changing rooms. The entrance fee? Just a shilling, roughly the price of a loaf of bread at the time. Today, nearly every cruise ship features a pool, but back then, this was a privilege only the wealthiest could enjoy. And while the pool was a sign of luxury, it wasn't the only place on board where passengers could focus on their health. Just a deck above, the Titanic featured another rarity, its own fully equipped gym. In an era when most people had never even seen a gym, the Titanic had one of the most advanced fitness centers of its time. Located on the boat deck, the gymnasium offered state-of-the-art exercise equipment, including stationary bikes, rowing machines, and even an early version of an electric treadmill. For passengers who wanted to stay active, this was a groundbreaking feature. Exercise was just beginning to gain popularity, and the idea of working out for leisure rather than necessity was still new. The gym wasn't just for fitness, it was a social space, often filled with first-class passengers dressed in elegant athletic wear, chatting as they cycled or lifted weights. There was even a mechanical camel and horse machine, designed to simulate horseback riding for those who missed their equestrian workouts. And if that wasn't enough, passengers could also take advantage of another wellness feature rarely seen on ships: the Titanic's luxurious Turkish baths. The Titanic didn't just provide a gym for exercise, it also offered a lavish way to relax afterward. The ship featured an elaborate Turkish bath complex, something that even many luxury hotels of the time didn't have. This exclusive space, located on F deck, was designed in a Moorish style, complete with intricate tiling, marble benches, and multiple heated rooms. For first-class passengers, this was the pinnacle of relaxation. They could move from a steam-filled hot room to a warm room before cooling off in the plunge pool. It was a feature inspired by the grand bathhouses of the Ottoman Empire, offering a level of indulgence unheard of on most ships. Even the Titanic's wealthiest guests were impressed. After all, few people had access to such amenities, even on land. These luxuries showcased just how ahead of its time the Titanic was. It wasn't just a ship, it was a floating palace, designed to rival the finest hotels of the world. But while the first-class passengers enjoyed its many comforts, the Titanic was also home to an entirely different world, one that had its own fascinating details hidden below deck. The Titanic wasn't just a passenger liner, it was also an official mail carrier for the British Royal Mail, giving it the title RMS Titanic or Royal Mail Ship. This designation meant that the ship carried thousands of letters and parcels, processed by a dedicated team of 5 postal clerks, including both American and British staff. They worked in a specially designed mailroom on the ship's G-deck, sorting letters by hand as Titanic made its way across the Atlantic. The scale of the operation was impressive. Titanic transported over 3,400 sacks of mail, amounting to 7 million pieces of correspondence. The clerks worked tirelessly, often for long hours in a windowless, cramped space, ensuring that letters reached their destinations efficiently. Tragically, as the ship sank, the postal workers attempted to save as much mail as possible, seen dragging heavy mail bags toward the upper decks in a futile effort. None of them survived, and their sacrifice remains one of the lesser-known but incredible stories of dedication aboard the Titanic. But letters weren't the only form of media on the ship. Titanic even had its own daily newspaper, a unique feature that set it apart from most other ocean liners of the time. In an era long before Wi-Fi and television, Titanic passengers had an unusual luxury: access to daily news, printed right on the ship. The Atlantic Daily Bulletin was the Titanic's very own onboard newspaper, published each day with the latest headlines, stock market updates, horse racing results, and even first-class menu highlights. The newspaper was printed in the ship's Marconi room, where wireless operators received news updates via telegraph. These snippets of information were then compiled into the bulletin and displayed throughout the ship, giving passengers a small but important connection to the outside world. It was an impressive innovation for the time, considering that real-time news updates were unheard of during long ocean voyages. The fact that Titanic passengers could read about the stock market's performance while sailing in the middle of the Atlantic was a luxury very few people had experienced before. While first-class travelers skimmed the newspaper over morning coffee, the ship's kitchens were busy preparing gourmet meals for its wealthiest passengers. And the last meal ever served on the Titanic has since become a haunting symbol of the extravagance that ended so tragically. The final dinner served to first-class passengers on the Titanic is a fascinating look at the sheer opulence of the ship. Hours before disaster struck, the ship's wealthiest guests sat down to a 10-course meal, an elaborate feast that included oysters, poached salmon, filet mignon, roast duck, and cold asparagus vinaigrette. The meal was topped off with desserts like peach compote, chocolate eclairs, and a selection of fine cheeses. What makes this meal so striking is the contrast. It was a scene of elegance, laughter, and indulgence, just moments before tragedy unfolded. Passengers enjoyed fine wines, listened to the orchestra play, and had no idea that within hours, the very world they knew would be turned upside down. The menu itself has been preserved, with surviving copies found in the pockets of passengers who made it onto lifeboats. Today, these menus are among the most valuable Titanic artifacts, offering a glimpse into the final moments of luxury before the chaos of the sinking. And that chaos might have played out very differently, had an important safety drill not been cancelled the very same day the Titanic hit the iceberg. Sunday, April 14, 1912, was supposed to include a mandatory lifeboat drill, a routine practice that would have familiarized both passengers and crew with the ship's emergency procedures. But for reasons that remain unclear, the drill was cancelled by Captain Edward Smith. Some historians speculate that he believed the ship's design made such drills unnecessary. Others think he may have wanted to avoid disturbing passengers enjoying their Sunday at sea. This cancellation turned out to be a fatal mistake. When the Titanic struck the iceberg that night, confusion spread quickly. Many passengers had no idea where to go, how lifeboats operated, or even how serious the situation was. The lack of preparedness resulted in lifeboats being launched half-empty, despite there not being enough for everyone on board. Had the drill been conducted as planned, it's possible that more people would have survived. Passengers might have been quicker to act, lifeboats could have been filled to capacity, and the chaotic evacuation could have been more organized. It remains one of the greatest what-ifs in the Titanic story, one small decision that might have changed the course of history. Amid the grandeur of the Titanic, one small but often overlooked crew member had a job just as important as any human on board: a cat named Jenny. Like many ships of the time, the Titanic had an official ship's cat, tasked with keeping the rodent population under control. Jenny was a working cat, likely brought on board from the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, where she had previously lived aboard the Titanic's sister ship, Olympic. Jenny quickly made herself at home, reportedly living near the kitchens, where the warmth of the ovens made for a cozy resting spot. Some crew members considered her a lucky charm, a common superstition among sailors who believed that having a cat aboard would bring good fortune. Others simply appreciated her presence as she hunted mice and rats that could damage food supplies. What happened to Jenny remains a mystery. Some stories claim she sensed disaster and disembarked in Southampton before Titanic set off on its maiden voyage. Others say she was seen on board up until the very end, curled up in a quiet corner of the ship. No official records confirm her fate, but like so many others aboard, Jenny became part of the Titanic's tragic legend. The sinking of the Titanic was more than just a tragedy. It became a turning point in maritime safety. Before the disaster, many ships were dangerously underprepared for emergencies, operating under outdated regulations that failed to consider the increasing size and capacity of modern ocean liners. The Titanic's loss exposed these flaws in the worst possible way, leading to sweeping changes in maritime law that still shape the rules of sea travel today. One of the most significant changes was the requirement for lifeboats. Before Titanic, ships weren't obligated to carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board. Titanic itself had only 20 lifeboats, enough for about 1,178 people, despite carrying over 2,200 passengers and crew. After the disaster, new laws required that ships have enough lifeboat space for every single person on board. Another major reform was the continuous operation of wireless radios. On the Titanic, the Marconi wireless operators were overwhelmed with personal telegrams from first-class passengers, meaning important safety messages, including iceberg warnings, weren't always prioritized. After the disaster, 24-hour radio watch became mandatory, ensuring that distress signals would never go unheard again. The Titanic also led to the creation of the International Ice Patrol, a monitoring service that still exists today, tracking icebergs in the North Atlantic to prevent future disasters. These regulations, born from tragedy, have saved countless lives. Today, every cruise ship, cargo vessel, and passenger liner follows protocols shaped by the lessons of the Titanic. And while the ship itself may be vanishing, its legacy endures, not just in history books, but in the very laws that keep modern passengers safe at sea. That's about it. Write in the comments which fact about the Titanic impressed you the most. For more useful information, watch other videos.